Star Wars The Acolyte showrunner Leslye Headland has admitted that one of the main purposes of her show is to break down the Jedi as a concept, fully engaging this show into liberalism and the act of destroying institutions for the sake of so called freedom. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. Also, please hit that like button. Let us send this video rocketing through the YouTube algorithm so more people can watch it. Wrote this up over at thatparkplace.com. And Leslye Headland did a post-episode 6 interview with Collider. Yes, the same publication that posted that absolutely heinous attack on Star Wars fans. Interesting that they would be doing an interview with Leslye Headland the same day that they attacked Star Wars fans. One wonders if Headland had anything to do with it or if Lucasfilm was behind it. Maybe that is how they got the interview in the first place, is that they were required to be an attack dog for Lucasfilm. Nevertheless, that's just speculation. Don't have any real details on that, but Headland did this interview with Collider, and she was asked by the outlet's Maggie Lovett this question: for you as a fan of Star Wars, how much fun has it been to get to pick apart these ideas that have been baked into the franchise for so long, and then flip the narrative a little bit and make people look at things from a very different point of view? She responded, I hope it's maybe making people look at it from a different point of view. I can understand that fans, especially people who don't know the High Republic, I don't think anyone knows what the High Republic is. If they do know what the High Republic is, they think it's absolute garbage and trash because they literally introduced characters named Leox Gyasi, and there's like a rock that can pilot a spaceship somehow. It's just utter ridiculous nonsense. I attempted to read the first novel by Charles Soule, and it was atrocious. I was actually extremely disappointed because I actually think Soule has written a decent Lando miniseries in Marvel Comics, but the preview that they released for that novel was awful. It was absolutely terrible, and the sales that we've seen come out have not looked good for it either. Getting stomped by Timothy Zahn's Legends books, specifically dealing with Thrawn. So it has not been good for Lucasfilm's publishing, and no one really knows what the High Republic is. Anyway, she goes on and says, may feel like I'm criticizing the Jedi as they exist in George Lucas's oeuvre, meaning the prequels and episodes 5 through 6, but that's not the case. That's absolutely the case. You can lie to yourself all you want, Leslye Headland. That is exactly what you are doing. You are criticizing the Jedi. That is what you are doing. And you actually admit later on in this interview that your whole goal is to break them down, deconstruct them as a concept. So yes, if you're deconstructing the Jedi as a concept, that does indeed apply to the Jedi as seen in episodes 5 through 6, as well as in Lucas's prequels. And 4 through 6, because Obi-Wan is in episode 4 as well. I don't know why she just left episode 4 out. We're so much further back from this. This is how she tries to rationalize this. We're so much further back from that. We're in that era that Obi-Wan is talking about in A New Hope. We're in that period where the proliferation of power is so huge and far-reaching. Actually, in the next episode, you're going to see how far-flung particular missions with Jedi are and the lack of oversight. Well, this is utterly ridiculous. We've already seen that the Jedi do indeed have oversight. They do indeed have a chain of command. They clearly have knights, masters, etc. She's shown this throughout her show. There's Padawans, like the Padawan and the knight go to confront Osha on the ship. Then things escalate. We bring in Master Soul, the Jedi Master. Things have escalated even further. They're now bringing in Vernestra, who unclear what exactly her position is, but she's clearly higher than Soul and can determine who gets assigned to different missions. So there's clearly oversight with the Jedi that she's shown us so far. Now, maybe there's not oversight from the political perspective, but even then, there wasn't a lot of oversight from the Republic, even in George Lucas's prequels. The Republic wasn't overseeing the Jedi. In fact, it was the Jedi who were asking Anakin Skywalker to inform on Chancellor Palpatine. and Palpatine was trying to use Anakin to inform on the Jedi. So there wasn't a lot of oversight from the Republic on the Jedi. So I'm not really sure exactly what she's even talking about, and I question whether or not she's actually watched the prequels, or if she did, fully understood or grasped what was actually happening in them. In a follow-up question, she made clear what her intention was. Lovett said this: "We get a little bit of a tease of that here in this episode with the whole thing with Rey and Court talking about doing this audit, especially the Jedi Order, which I think is great. That's very true to what George Lucas was approaching things in the prequels. Absolutely not." Which is very political, very much a response to that kind of dynamic with the Jedi. Sure, you can argue that the Jedi were indeed tied with the governing body of the Republic, but they were also trying to guide the Republic in making the right decisions. But at the end of the day, they weren't enforcing anything. We saw this when they comment on Palpatine being elected, and how they announced the marshaling of the army and things like that. Obviously, the Jedi do take on roles as generals, and they are heavily embedded with the clones and the clone army and etc. But they aren't specifically kind of one and the same. The Jedi are not the same as the Republic. They are still two separate entities until obviously the Republic exists no more. It becomes an empire. Order 66 is enacted, and the Empire and its troops massacre the Jedi. So this is what Headland said. She says, yeah, so comparing these Jedi to the Jedi in the prequels is a little difficult because it's 100-ish years. No, it's not. They would still be acting the same way. They would still be having the same principles. They would still be dedicated to the Jedi Order. There are clear examples of this in both the Catholic and Orthodox faith. They have stayed pretty much the same. Obviously, there have been new revelations with the Holy Spirit that has guided the church, but they are pretty much as they were over 2,000 years ago. So the Jedi Order, I think, is very similar to the church, and that they would not have actually changed. They would still be operating very similar to what they were just a century past. So ridiculous rationalization here. It doesn't really make any sense. So you see Vernestra's like, we cannot let this happen. She gets more and more concerned about that at the end of the season, and rightfully so, because she, as a very powerful Jedi Master, can sort of see what's on the horizon, whereas when we meet the Jedi in the prequels, they're completely enmeshed at that point. Again, they're not, kind of talked about that already, the Jedi are not enmeshed with the Republic. They are still distinct, and neither one kind of has significant leverage over the other and is telling them what to do. She then returned to the question saying, going back to your question, one of the interesting ways to unpack the Jedi is when they are at their height as they are here, what are the things they're doing differently? A Jedi doesn't pull their weapon unless prepared to kill. That's just a High Republic concept. That's also absolutely bogus and not true, as we saw in the Acolyte. Complete contradiction. She's absolutely lying here. We see Yord pull his lightsaber out all the time when he's not ready to kill. He uses it as a flashlight. So that's just an utterly ridiculous thing that they use to try and like have cringe garbage dialogue and try and make points. It's just absolutely stupid. And look, at the end of the day, they don't actually follow it even in the show. They don't have battle droids. They don't have other people with lightsabers. There isn't any reason to pull it. Clearly, this is not true either. There are people that still have blasters. There are people that still have butter knives. Even in like kind of what I've seen from the High Republic stuff, there are clearly villains out there, and we see the Jedi engaging with other people. They're obviously kind of like explorers as well, so they're going to different worlds where there are clearly people that are not within the Republic, and they are kind of acting as kind of like missionaries, I guess, maybe potentially. So there's obviously danger and things like that. There would be many reasons why they would be pulling their lightsabers other than to just being prepared to kill. It's utterly stupid concept, and she's just lying. She's lying to herself and lying to us in this here because we if you've watched the show, you know this that they do pull the lightsaber outside of being prepared to kill. It seems like it's a time where you can break down the okay. So in my opinion, and in my experience, oh, sorry, here. I skipped ahead here. There isn't any reason to pull it. Comparing that to anybody in the prequels, it's not the same. They're just not the same Jedi. Well, why aren't they the same? Because you really haven't explained why they aren't the same. They're clearly still operating within the Republic. What exactly changed for them to not be the same in the course of the 100 years? No explanation for this. No actual. We haven't seen anything in the story. She's just saying this. It's her own. It's her own headcanon. It's fan fiction. It's complete and utter fake. Then she goes on and says this. So in my opinion, and in my experience, and what I was interested in digging into is it seems like it's a time where you can break down the Jedi as a concept. Well, there you go. If they're different Jedi, then how are you breaking them down as a concept? They're different from the prequels. They're different from episodes 4, 5, and 6. How are you breaking down the Jedi as a concept? Well, they're clearly the same. You're now contradicting yourself because what you really want to do is you want to break down the Jedi as a concept. Whereas I wouldn't want to touch what has been established with them a century later. Except that's exactly what you're doing. You're breaking them down a century before, so you're changing what comes after. And that's the whole point. That's the whole point of this. We'll get to this in a little bit here. Why this is the whole point. It's not shocking that she would want to tear down the Jedi because she actually admits that she put her personal ideology into the character of Chimere, the Sith villain. So she touches on this relationship between Chimere and Osha. She literally endorses like a ship between them, totally embracing shipping culture, which is just absolutely horrid. We should not be embracing this stuff. We should actually be probably tamping it down, saying no to this stuff. But Leslye Headland is embracing it because it suits her agenda. But this is what she said. Once the response happened, I was like, great, everyone's responding the way I did to Manny's performance. This is also something, too, in this interview. She feigns like she doesn't know what's happening, and then she'll like make comments like this, like, oh, everyone is loving it. Like she is actually paying attention. I mean, she's such a dishonest person. Even throughout this interview where she's literally getting fed milk toast or cheesecake questions and commentary because the woman is just like slobbering all over her. Is like just lapping it up. It's actually kind of embarrassing when you read the interview. To Manny's performance, to the intention of the character, to his personal ideology that I really relate with. Because if you think about it, he's very much the counterculture character in the show. So I love that everybody's focused on everything else. It's absolutely not true because, as we'll see right here, Chimere's personal ideology is literally the dominant culture in the United States, in the Western society. Now you can argue, and he's clearly not counterculture in the show because he's clearly like living outside of society. They have him living on some unnamed planet. He's a hermit. He's not even engaged within the culture. So there's absolutely no way he can be counterculture. So what she's really saying here is like him believing in what he believes is counterculture here in the United States, in the West. And it's absolutely not true because this is what his ideology is. We found this out in the 5th episode. He informs Master Soul what he wants, and what he wants is freedom, the freedom to wield my power the way I like without having to answer to Jedi like you. I want a pupil, an acolyte. Basically wants to groom other people into this disgusting, evil ideology. But this one went back on our deal, obviously referring to May. He's kind of got her in a headlock. She exposed me, so now I have to kill every single last one of you. I don't make the rules. The Jedi do, and the Jedi say I can't exist. They see my face. They all die. So it clearly sounds like he is making his own rules. If the Jedi see me, I got to kill him. Obviously, that's kind of fine. I actually thought this was probably the best line in episode 5. This is the best line of dialogue in the show because it is exactly what the Sith actually believe. They believe that they should have the freedom to do whatever they want. They can commit any kind of atrocity. They can lie. They can do all kinds of evil, and it's totally fine with them. And that's exactly what they believe. And then they have this kind of contradiction where they're literally lying, telling you what they kind of believe, but they're trying to justify it through a lie. So it's like, it's not me making these rules up. It's you, the Jedi, are doing it. And that's why I must kill you. And it's like, no, you're the one literally making the rules up as you're saying this stuff. But to me, this literally confirms that Leslye Headland is an absolute sociopath. And she actually wants the freedom to commit all kinds of evil. I mean, remember, she says that his personal ideology that I really relate with, which to me, she's just admitting that that's actually her personal ideology. And this is actually the ideology that is widespread here in the West Author Patrick Deneen had a discussion recently with Bishop Barron about this, and he does an excellent explanation of what this ideology is. And this ideology is liberalism. Let's take a listen to how he defines it and what exactly it means, because it literally is what Kymir says, the freedom to do whatever he wants.
Basic presupposition of liberalism, as I understand it, and I think as the tradition of political philosophy and theology would understand this, is that liberalism is ideally about the completely and truly free human being, the person, and freedom in the modern sense, freedom from any kind of obstacle or that which prevents us from achieving what it is we wish, what our will would desire. Of course, this is in contrast to the classical and the Christian understanding of liberty, as you know well. And that I would say, for much of American history, certainly for much of course, Western history, even if that modern view wasn't predominant, there was a kind of practice that came alongside its more ancient understanding. And those practices were basically practices we would think of as the sort of practices of virtue. In other words, a kind of the capacity to be self-limiting and learning to be self-limiting, which is, of course, very deeply in the Aristotelian tradition, very deeply in the Christian tradition. But when your definition of liberty becomes the freedom from, or the freedom to do as one wishes, then those older practices and even institutions that taught us a kind of self-limitation, those now have to be either eliminated or changed, redefined, right? So that it's...
So there you go. This is literally what Leslye Headland is doing in The Acolyte. She wants to dissect the concept of the Jedi, and what she wants to do is redefine it. She wants to change it. She wants to warp and twist it into something that she wants to make it. She wants to make it into her vision of liberalism. That's exactly what she wants to do, and she's doing this before the prequel, so it's going to make absolutely no sense. But that's exactly what she is trying to do. This is what she wants, and this isn't surprising. She admitted this in an interview with Vanity Fair before the show even released, where she claimed that she finds religion to be oppressive. And obviously, the Jedi are a religious order, and she finds them oppressive. She wants to change them and warp them and twist them. And she says, this is unusual to point to pieces of pop culture that have representation of extreme spirituality. The concept of God is such a heavy concept. It's absolutely not. There's so many examples of pieces of pop culture that do have significant spirituality. Warhammer 40K, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Chronicles of Narnia. I mean, you name it, the list goes on. Most of the biggest IPs, brands have forms of spirituality in it, because that is true to our human nature. So I don't really even know what she's talking about here. She says the concept of God is such a heavy concept. The concept of religion is such a really oppressive one. So there you go. She thinks that religion is oppressive, which absolutely is not. It's the complete opposite. When you take your burdens and bring them to Christ, when you bring them to God, it's truly freeing, because you're relying fully on Him. He is taking those burdens off of you. You're not being weighed down. You have that freedom, and you can see that freedom among people who truly do that. I was watching a video of Russell Brand recently, and you can just kind of see the joy that he has, the happiness, the peace that he has found in faith in Christ and God. And that's exactly what we have as Christians. We have this peace, we have this joy. And instead, Leslye Headland is, I think, kind of jealous of that. And she sees it as oppressive. And she sees it as oppressive because she wants to do whatever she wants to do without any kind of consequences for that. And obviously, we know that she is a lesbian, and she engages in these disordered lifestyles. And that's why she sees it as oppressive, because she's actually just disobeying that tenet. And she knows it. She knows what she's doing. And I think she knows what she's doing is wrong. And instead, she's just lashing out at it. She's taking it out on Star Wars here, and basically just throwing a big temper tantrum like a child. And this is kind of who Lucasfilm hired. They hired a child throwing a temper tantrum to run a Star Wars show. She goes on, though, and says, especially for people like myself and many others. Like, again, she's referring to the fact that she engages in disordered, unnatural relationships. So what you just made me realize is that part of the lasting effect is that Star Wars is a spiritual story. I don't know why she's saying that. Like anyone who's watched Star Wars realizes that. Even Tolkien is not as spiritual as the Force is or as Yoda is. I think that is another ridiculous claim. I think that that's kind of a surface level reading of Tolkien. Tolkien is extremely spiritual, even in The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and then especially when you get into like the Silmarillion and things like that as well, that obviously were published posthumously. I remember as a child being raised in a Catholic home when Yoda says luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. Even as a kid, I understood that so much more than I understood catechisms and sacraments and all of those other things. I got that immediately, that I have a spirit in addition to having a body. Yeah, she has a soul. We all do. We have a soul made in the image and likeness of God. For George to have done that, it's almost an impossible thing. Remember, she finds religion oppressive, right? And then she's actually admitting here that she does seem to actually believe in a lot of the stuff. And again, that's why I think that she does indeed have guilt. She knows what she's doing is wrong, and she's lashing out. And then she went on to confirm that this was part of the Acolyte. That would be my big hope in getting to play in this world, to continue to search through a spiritual story that changes someone's identity or destiny. That to me is the heart. Again, she wants to use this liberal ideology that she thinks she really relates to, that she has Chimere saying, and kind of wants to clearly it's going to be Osha and trying to get her to buy into this, change her destiny, and then also obviously change the institution of the Jedi and radically destroy it, because that's what these people want to do. We see this throughout our, especially if you live here in the United States, you see that throughout the society. That's what a lot of these people are doing. They're tearing down statues. They're trying to, they say that like, oh, democracy is under attack, when they're literally like attack the Supreme Court. They attack all these institutions. They make up like ridiculous new interpretations of things like, oh, you can't actually express your Christianity in a school, in a public school. It's like, what? No, we've always been able to do that. You just are reinterpreting it, trying to capture the institution through this liberal mindset here. So that's all the show is. It's a giant piece of propaganda for liberal ideology, and it's also therapy for Leslye Headland and her lashing out in a temper tantrum. It's absolutely it's sickening. It's sickening that that's what these people have done. That Kathleen Kennedy, Bob Iger approved this and allowed this to happen. But the joke's on them, because the viewership is down. 232.2 million is the latest for the 5th episode. If you compare that to Ahsoka, that is down almost 60%. It's a 344.8 million minute gap. And then even if you want to compare how Disney does their little view calculation, where you divide total minutes watched by the runtime, it's still a 40% decline. Ahsoka comes out to like 11.3 million, and then Acolyte comes out to around 6.8 million. So, but obviously there's like lots of different factors. You got rewatch time in there. You've got people watching earlier episodes potentially. Clearly, people don't watch all of the episode. People skip the intros. They probably don't watch all the way through the credits. So there's lots of different factors, but I think it's very clear, though, that it is performing significantly worse than Ahsoka. And then even Ahsoka was not performing as well as what you would expect a Star Wars show to perform on. It was performing about at the same level as Andor, and we know Andor wasn't performing well because the showrunner admitted that he was chasing the audience in an interview with one of the Penske-owned trade publications, The Hollywood Reporter, Deadline, or Variety. I don't remember which one, but that's pretty much what I got to say. I'm glad that people are tuning out of this and not getting brainwashed by this. It's also confirmation that these people have no clue what they're doing. George Lucas literally said this just a month or two ago during an appearance at the Cannes Film Festival in May. He said, I was the one who really knew what Star Wars was, who actually knew this world, because there's a lot to it. The Force, for example, nobody understood the Force. When they started the other ones after I sold the company, a lot of the ideas that were in the original sort of got lost. But that's the way it is. You give it up, you give it up. I don't think they've got lost. I think they brought in people like Leslye Headland. They brought in people like Rian Johnson. They brought in people like J.J. Abrams. They continued with Dave Filoni, and they are reshaping Star Wars into what they want it to be. And Leslye Headland here is admitting that she's doing that with the Jedi, and is attempting to deconstruct the Jedi in the Acolyte. But let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, but to always speak the truth.